Oh,
Hello,
no.
welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Gigi Fuscamise. I'm the Director of Community Relations for 3D Theatricals. And on behalf of my entire team, I want to welcome you to this session of 3D and you. I'm just getting so many people popping in. So we've had a great day. We've talked about, oh gosh, I'm just gonna go over what we've done today. We have had yoga, we've had vocal coaching, we did our freak flag cardio, we've asked our casting director, Amber Sneed, a bunch of questions she probably didn't want to answer, but she answered them anyway. And we just had perspectives on directing with Luke Yankee. And now we end our day with a one-on-one with veteran director of stage, screen, television, Joel Zwick. Joel, Mr. Zwick, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us here.
This is great. I mean, I get to remember my past at a time when people actually want to hear what I have to say. I think it's terrific.
Well, yeah, I mean, when you look up Joel Zwick, your IMDb page, your Wikipedia, it just kind of goes on and on and on for a few pages. There's a lot you've done in your very long and successful career. So all of us are going to have a lot of questions, but I wanted to go over a few things. First of all, why don't you tell us how things started for you? How did you came from Brooklyn, you came from what kind of family, what got you into the arts and then into stage?
Well, okay, here we go. I was born in Brooklyn, New York, Sheepshead Bay, many years ago, and we were decidedly lower middle class. We lived in a 3-room apartment. My brother and I shared a little bed, and my mother and father had the pull-out couch in the living room. But there was always food, and we had never had a fear of losing ahead of our thing. But basically, I had no goals. There were just no goals growing up in Sheepshead Bay, Brooklyn. For a while there, I thought it'd be really nifty if I grew up, I could become a bank teller, because I thought they dressed kind of nice, and I thought their hours were from 10 to 3. Boy, was I wrong. But nonetheless, I didn't do it. So I had no goals. Truly remarkable. I just kind of followed the path of Brooklyn at that particular period of time. Went from my public school, 254, where I came in twice, mind you, 2 years back to back in the talent contest, always coming in second, which was very interesting, right? Then to junior high school. Junior high school, I got into some operettas that we did at junior high school. I had a little bit of a ham acting thing in me, but God, was I a bad actor when I really look back on it and think how lucky I was that I didn't try to make my living as an actor. That just wouldn't have happened. But at any rate, I did these operettas and met a young girl in these operettas who was singing a smaller role. I was, of course, playing the comic lead. She was just playing like one of the Yum Yum Pity Sing sisters, Peepo, I don't know what her name was. But anyway, this was 1953, and we were morphing into Madison High School. James Madison High School, if you need, I can give you a credit list of who has graduated from James Madison High School, which is scary. But anyway, this young lady, it was the beginning of rock and roll. It was just the beginning of rock and roll. It was a great period of time to be turning teen. Let me tell you, it was 1953, 1954, and every high school in Brooklyn had what we called a doo-wop rock and roll group, 4-part harmony, bass, soprano, alto, tenor, and that was it. You would do covers of At the Hop or crazy songs of the 50s, and we had a group, we called ourselves the Cosigns, because we had met in a trigonometry class or something. I have no idea what we did, what that was all about, but it didn't really make a difference. The key to the group at Madison High School was that the singer-songwriter who was the leader of the group grew up to be Carole King. The women seem to be reacting good. But yeah, so Carole and I dated for a number of years, and because of the fact that we were both in the Cosigns together, we would go to rock and roll shows and kind of behave as a couple, since neither of us had a serious person in our lives at that time. But then most of my life was about connections and just the ability to always try. Never turn down things for fear. Just if it's an opportunity to prove what you got on the things, then get in there and prove what you got. So basically, what happened was that Carole introduces me to some guy named Roy Levine. Roy Levine becomes my best friend. Roy Levine gets a chance to direct an off-Broadway show in 1967, I think it was, called McBird. Look it up. It was really a feisty number. But at any rate, I got on that show because I was Roy's best friend, not because I was particularly talented. I became an assistant stage manager, took over, doing work behind certain roles, replacing roles, smaller roles, backup roles, did that for a while. And while doing McBird, which had in it as its cast at the time, Stacy Keach, Rue McClanahan, Cleavon Little, and there was one other major, Rue McClanahan, Bill Devane. Those were four. So they're really, these were good. These were actors. And I'm this little punk out there trying to brag my way through Shakespeare somehow. It's not working that well, but I'm in the show. And I realized I can't be an actor. So once again, I had no hopes. I didn't know what I was going to do in life. You know, I'd followed the prerequisite stuff. I went to college. I majored in pre-med because I thought as a nice Jewish boy in Brooklyn, I should be a doctor and maybe I'd become middle class as opposed to lower middle class. And when that didn't work after my first year, my grades were not good enough. I demoted myself to pre-dent and then spent the next year and a half taking all the lab courses in pre-dent. The first half of my junior year, I was taking organic chemistry and physics. I was in the third week of a 15-week semester when all of a sudden I got called into a meeting with my professor of both physics and organic chemistry. And they just sat me down and said, listen, we think you're a nice kid. And if you'll promise us that you will never go into the sciences, we will pass you and you do not have to come back to class. Well, it was a deal and I took that deal. I was not going to not take that deal. So there I was with literally 3 semesters left to complete a master's, because in those days, in the 1950s, 50s, little early 60s, you were not going to stay in school longer than 4 years. You were living in a bed with your brother. I mean, you had to get moving. So I had to get moving, and basically, McBird gave me a chance to get into Actors Equity, and then one of the actors in McBird, the next connecting point to how my life materialized, still with no goals, mind you, was Andy Robinson. He's the Scorpio killer in Dirty Harry, just as a name. But anyway, so he calls me up because I'd met him. He was going to understudy at McBird. So I've been running his understudy rehearsals. He has a thing he wants to try, which is a workshop that's being done at La Mama in New York. Now, for those of you who don't know La Mama was a bastion of the avant-garde off-Broadway theater in New York, started in 1961 by Ellen Stewart. And basically, over the 57 years that it's still in operation, mind you, they've produced over 6,000 plays. And the names of people that came out were given a chance to try themselves out as actors or for special things as artists at La Mama is pretty extraordinary. But at any rate, I went into this workshop with Andy Robinson, and I was just going to be in the workshop. I just thought that would be a good thing for me to do. I wasn't doing anything else. So Andy had written a play called Last Chance Saloon, and it was supposed to be directed by somebody else, and I was going to be the stage manager. I wasn't even good enough to be a character in the play. But at any rate, so there I was as a stage manager for this thing. 1 week into rehearsal, I get called down into Ellen Stewart's office with Andy Robinson. They want me to replace the director and take over directing the production. Now, I'm amazed because I've never directed anything before. And these people had never seen me direct. What was in their brain? But somehow they thought that just based on who I was or something, that I was going to be able to do this. So I couldn't turn it down. My theory, opportunity comes in. I just worked hard and jammed and learned. Now I had certain, background that made sense. I had a master's in Commedia dell'arte. That was useful. So I had different skills along the way that I had to kind of put together. I was a bit of a dancer. I danced in Summer Stock and West Side Story and Flower Drum Song and that kind of stuff as a Summer Stock stage manager and actor. And so therefore I had chops. I could dance a little, I could sing a little, I could act a little, I could do a little of everything. And sure enough, they gave me this job to direct it. And it turned out to be a success. And it played the West End of London. It toured Europe. And I was a director. I came back. Now I was a director of theater that I wasn't expecting to be. So I'm now running this troupe, La Mama Plexus, we called ourselves. And we're trying to formulate things to do. you know, with ups and downs, more downs than ups, as I recall. We then moved on. I was teaching at Queens College. That's the next connector. There was a kid who was in my class at Queens College, a really pushy Italian kid from the, you know, Upper West Side. So he was going to get into my troupe whether I wanted him or not. Turned out to be Greg Antonacci. He wrote a play that the troupe did called Dance with Me, which appeared on Broadway in 1975 or something like that. Yeah, I think so. And basically, I got a Tony nomination for that. I got a Drama Desk nomination for it. And then all of a sudden, people are hiring me to direct traveling productions of Shenandoah, Oklahoma, big tent musicals. So I got to do that. And it still didn't mean anything to me because there was no career happening. I basically, you know, did a review. The review took me to Chicago, took me to Las Vegas. And then my friend Greg, who had done Dance with Me, he was on the West Coast because friends of his that he met at Queens College who got into the West Coast business dragged him out. So I went out to visit him and he decided it would be a great idea if I could direct a sitcom. And I'm thinking to myself, oh boy, I didn't even know what a sitcom is. I wasn't a television viewer particularly. But once again, I had to commit myself to the fact that, okay, I got to try this. It looks like I may be having an opportunity. I got to go after it. So after a number of incidences, the key one being when I went up to Paramount to basically talk to them about my directing an episode. And I walked in and all I said was, listen, I know I've never directed an episode of a sitcom before, so there's no way I can prove to you that I can direct an episode of a sitcom. But I've been watching for a couple of weeks now, and in my estimation, a monkey can direct a sitcom. And she looked at me and she said, excuse me a second, picked up the phone, called CBS and says, I got this guy I'm sending over, I want him to direct. Somehow that won. I don't think you can pull that off today. I just don't know that today you get away with that kind of approach to try and get hired. But anyway, so that started me. I did an episode of, my first episode was a thing called Busting Loose. It starred Adam Arkin, who's become a terrific director himself, and he has a terrific father, Alan, who's still kicking butt and taking names, but essentially it was his show, and I got to direct an episode, but then I had to go back to New York to direct a play I was doing. And I noticed that the same producers, it was Mark Rothman and Lowell Gans, they had basically had a new show that they were doing based on, for Ted Knight, or for the Mary Tyler Moore Show, they created a character. And so I noticed in the paper that they had another show, and I simply wrote them saying, listen, if there's any way you can get me to come out and do a show, boy, I'd love that. And sure enough, they gave me an episode. I acted in one as a bunny salesman. That's right, a bunny salesman. You want to know what a character like a bunny salesman looks like and sounds kind of like this. But essentially, and then I directed an episode, and then Paramount thought I was pretty good because they were getting to a period of time at that time, timing was terrific, where they were deciding that perhaps theater directors might make good situation comedy directors because essentially you're staging a 22, 23-minute play, you know, with characters who know the works, know who they are, know their lines, sets that people have been walking in for so long, they got track marks on where they can go or can't go. And so basically that was it. I was a career sitcom director all of a sudden. And then luckily I got involved with Gary Marshall. I got involved with Tom Miller and Bob Boyette, and they had the whole TGIF lineup on Fridays, I think on ABC, and I had every one of them for 17 straight years. Miller Boyette gave me a show to direct, and pretty much that was it. But one of the shows that I directed early on, I went from, the first show I got to direct, which I became the sole director of, was Laverne and Shirley. And Laverne and Shirley took me to school. Those girls had been around and they knew exactly what they were doing. And they could get things done so fast if you would just stay out of their way. And they liked me because I had this wild New York energy. And basically, I was willing to let them play. It didn't make any difference to me. I had no, I didn't realize you weren't supposed to. I also had other things. I never worked with a script. Never worked with a script in theater because sometimes I was actually in the shows I was directing. But I never worked with the script. I've read the script, I understand the script. I think I understand the movement of the script and why things are happening, how the story, and then basically I simply watch actors. And if I'm watching actors, I can give honest responses. I can laugh when they're funny. I can be, a guest when they're not fun. I mean, I can all of a sudden become a participant in what they're doing. So that kind of worked for me as a style, because that's just the nature of who I was. I mean, and basically people used to say to me, how did I go from La Mama to Laverne and Shirley? And the connector for me always was a commedia dell'arte, where basically it's a very physicalized kind of humor. And basically you have stock characters who are in stock situations where the audience kinds of knows who they are, and they waits to see the stupid things they're going to do or the good things they're going to do. And that's basically why I made the connection, except when I went to Laverne and Shirley, the actor level had raised itself considerably. Now, all of a sudden, I was talking about people who really had earned their credentials and were up there, the #1 show in America. And here I was directing it for 2 years. That was crazy. But then it was, then there was the next show, which was the one that really pushed me into the next level, although I didn't realize that was, I'd gotten pretty hot at directing pilots. So ABC and Miller Boyette put me together to do this pilot called Bosom Buddies. And they brought in some talent from all around. Donna Dixon was brought in. Tom Hanks had been found in New York City in a cold water flat. I think he was understudying an off-Broadway show or something even sadder than that. And we brought all these people in with screen tests and what have you. And Bosom Buddies happened. Although as these things happen, Peter Scolari wasn't the first Bosom Buddy. Nobody's ever the first. We're changing things forever. But the first Bosom Buddy didn't last a day before I called the producers down and said, you got to see what's going on down here. And within 5 minutes, that kid was let go. And I found Peter Scolari, who I'd worked with on a previous show, and the two of them hit it off great. They really could play together. They liked each other. So that was a big help. And so Tom and I became kind of friendly only because of the fact that we had children, and nobody else in the Bosom Buddies cast had children. That's kind of special. His kids were about a year each older than my boy. His boy was 2 years older than my girl. His daughter was exactly the same birthday, but 1 year older. And so we'd go, we'd have picnics down at his house. He'd bring the kids up to go swimming at my pool because he couldn't afford a pool. And essentially, that was it. And basically, I went on and continued churning out at that point, probably something like 550 episodes of TV, where I started to smell the fact that that Miller Boyette had decided it was time to get out of the business. They had made enough money with TGIF, and they were theater people. They wanted to go back to producing Broadway. So they left TV, and I found myself kind of, instead of being the helm of a show, like doing an entire season of Full House or an entire season of Perfect Strangers or whatever the show was I was doing, all of a sudden I was getting 4 episodes of this, 2 episodes of that, 3 episodes of this. And the problem with that kind of work is that in every location that you go to, you have to readapt to the rules of the new location. How does it work? What is their system? You got to go in early. You got to study their system. You got to make sure you understand what they're going for. You got to meet the actors, meet the cameramen, meet the people that you. And basically, I was starting to feel like it was time to just call it a day in TV. And I had a script that I thought was pretty darn good, and I sent it off to Tom. I wanted his opinion. So he gives me a call and he says he looked it over. He thinks it's a pretty interesting script and actually gave me specific notes, God bless him. He spent some time on it. And then he said, but why is this all about? And I said, well, Tom, I think it's time. I got it. Maybe have to get out of TV. I think maybe there's some cachet in directing romantic comedies for independent features. And he said, oh, well, listen, I've got a movie I'd like you to direct. And he sends me the script to My Big Fat Greek Wedding. I mean, that instantaneous, it was like, what? Okay, My Big Fat Greek Wedding. And basically, then we just decided, Nee and I got together with Tom, and the rules of engagement were set as to the fact that it's very tricky when you have a writer, star, and there's too much power base. So Tom wanted to be sure that that power base got equalized, that she was not running that movie. He didn't want her to run the movie. So I got the movie, and that went into 10 years of features. And these things are a pain in the butt, features. Each one takes a minimum, if you're lucky, of 2 years. And then all of a sudden, it comes out. And either you luck out with My Big Fat Greek Wedding, which is the best thing ever, or it doesn't work out quite so well with you for Fat Albert, which was a lovely movie, but Cosby killed us. And then, there was something else. So basically, Then after that, my daughter. Yes, my daughter was the next connection. She was one of these go-getter, salutatorians from USC in the film history area kind of thing. Yes, indeed. And and basically, she was working now for the Disney Channel. She was working current for the Disney Channel. I mean, she'd sit in on shows that were being shot, and she would give her notes. So I took her out to lunch one day, and when her boss found out that I was her father, he started to work her and said, do you think there's any way you can get your dad to come over to Disney and direct some TV for us? So I said to Hillary, Hillary, is this going to help your career? And she said, I think so. I said, good. Then you tell them that I will direct anything that you tell me to direct. And that was it. That was in the 7 years of my career, was directing the Disney show, Shake It Up and Casey Undercover, and feel very proud and good that I was there from 12-year-old Zendaya all the way to what's becoming a terrific young lady. So I'm very, very proud of her right now. She'll be the next Tom Hanks in my legacy. Okay, that's it.
Well, that's it. Well, okay, I'll go to my second question now. Joel, this is, in the previous session, we had some young directors asking, what does it take to be a director? What should you do? What steps? But, you come from the golden age of television. When I hear your stories of like, hey, guys, why don't you just let me do it? It wasn't TV like it is today.
Correct.
That they could take a chance on you. And it seemed like you said, we started off, you dated Carole King, it moved to this relationship. Relationships are very important in this business or any other. Any business.
And how one leads is exactly the same. I find that out, I wrote a book about directing the sitcom. And it's not about that book, but it's about the fact that it's how one leads.
Exactly.
And anybody who leads in any industry, who knows how to lead, knows that the job is basically to create an environment that allows for the people that you bring into that environment to be the best they can possibly be. And then you help them to do that. You help them to be the best. My joke is usually you do not decide that there's a role for an elephant in the play and you think it'd be really clever to cast a giraffe. Well, you're in a lot of trouble if you're going to try to push that giraffe into becoming an elephant. It ain't going to work. You just got to, take what you got and find a character, an actor, an actress that's the soul, or you feel close to the soul of the character that they're going to have to represent, and then just let them go. You don't give them line readings. You're not talking to them about that stuff. You're coaxing. You're laughing at funny things. You mum at other things. And actors learn pretty quickly how that relationship works.
Well, obviously you're an actor's director. You have a respect for them, and and it's also, I'm sure, that untold expectation. You're hired, you come to play, you better be prepared and ready to go, and you'll give them that. As a director, you don't want to teach them how to act.
You don't want to teach them how to act, and you don't want to be part of the process of them learning their lines.
Right.
Not interested in you using my rehearsal because you have not done any homework, basically, and you don't know your lines. If we decide that scene's going to be off book, that scene's going to be off book. Otherwise, I won't do the scene, because that's not the process. The process doesn't begin for the actor until they've absorbed the words. Because as they absorb the words, they're learning things that they think that they want to try, things that interest them, things that's their own thing. Somebody once used this illusion that when he does a show, it's like taking little cones of silence and putting it over each actor in the play. Now, his job is to stay out of their cones until they say, come on in, I want to talk to you. But his job is to move the cones so that if they need to cross to the table, they know they're sitting here. And if they need to cross there, so now by this point, the actor has gained a lot of information. By this point, the actor has started to understand the words they're saying, and now they're understanding how to physically tie those words into movements, and it's at that point that we can play. But I get staged very fast. I want to get the actors playing as quick as I can. I'm not interested in taking much time staging. 90% of the staging they can do themselves. Every once in a while, something stupid will happen. Like I remember we were doing an episode of Perfect Strangers, and Mark is one of the most disciplined, crafty, creative artists as an actor you'll ever see, Mark Lynn Baker. And Bronson Pinchot, who is funny as hell, is a loony bird. So he would come out. Mark and I would have already figured out the scene, while Bronson was in the back doing what he called his COD, or crap of death. And then he would come out, and Mark would be sitting on the couch, and Bronson would come in and say, I think I know what I need to do. I will come in, I will cross to the kitchen, I will open the kitchen door, I will get something to drink, I will sit down and have that thing to drink, and then I will cross to the couch. And all I said to him was, Bronson, I think that's excellent staging, but at that particular point, you need to know that all the cameras will be pointed at the couch. And he said, well, then I know what I'll do. I'll come in and I'll cross to the couch. I said, Bronson, that's a terrific way to do that scene. But it's a lot of it is, when you walk in on a show that's been pre-cast.
I was going to ask you about that. I mean, when you're a guest director, like you said, you do 3 episodes here,
yeah,
and it's already like a set cast. How do you deal with that dynamic?
Well, basically, I go in usually the week before I'm going to do it. I meet the cast. I watch how they're doing. They get a chance to grumble to me because I'll be standing there around. They'll come over and say, I hate this line. Why can't I get to the better line? Or whatever problem they are having at that particular moment. But essentially, I'd spend a week meeting the camera operators because it's my belief that I can inspire. I don't have to know what that character is. I'll find out what that character is as soon as they open their mouths. But my job is there to inspire them to take the leap of faith. Go for the moment, despite the fact that I don't think there's any way you can make the moment. But,
Interesting. Sorry, I got a plane going over here.
The nerve.
I know, really. Well, and of course, it took my thought right away. Okay. So, directing for the stage compared to the screen, movie or TV. How do you approach it? It's got to be different because in theater, live theater, it's really, once it's set, the show's frozen and it's opening night, they're out there, it's an actor's medium, they're dealing with that energy and that audience at that time. Stage, or excuse me, screen, you got a lot of technical issues you're dealing with, like you said, the cameras and all that.
Oh yeah, there's no question about it. Well, doing a live theater can be as simple, and if this style of acting will only change depending upon the writing, not dependent upon whether you're on stage or you're one there. So if you're doing a little family drama, we nowadays have microphones. All actors are being mic'd. This whole idea of having to speak to the back row is gone. But if the style of a play is a farce, you're going to get into some physical things on stage that are harder to pull off than if you're pulling it off in a film. But in a film, it's the same thing. Everything's bound on story. You've got to have a story that needs to be told, and you have to find the clearest way to tell the story. And that's essentially for the actor. The actor basically, you have to, I just did something fascinating last night because I took a one-man play that I've been doing about Irving Berlin with this artist, Hershey Felder.
Yes, wonderful.
And Hershey was of all places, God bless him, in Florence, Italy, and that he had set up a set there, and he brought in Italian filmmakers and all kinds of sound people and all this stuff. He was doing this primarily to raise funds for the theaters that supported him through the years. So he was doing that, and it was amazing because I was watching a man who was performing a one-man show where he talks directly to the audience, and all of a sudden he was put it on film. And you know something? It automatically modified his performance. His performance was already more personal. He would talk to the camera so that you would basically talking directly to you, whereas you're in an audience, half the time he's looking at other parts of the audience. So I found that to be fascinating, and we're starting to plan on doing another one now.
Oh, that's great news. Well, I saw that show with you, actually.
Yes, you did.
And just... he's amazing. But you bring up a good point. I mean, Tom Hanks could say more with just, when the camera is up to him and he's just twitching his eyes, just thinking.
Yep.
Compared to, like you said, being on stage at a first, I've got to play to the back of the house. And I got to have the big eyes, see? And I got to...
And Tom has done Tom has gotten off in there. He's done a few Broadway shows while playing out his career, so he kind of understands how one can work in theater, spent 3 summers at the Cleveland Shakespeare Festival, one of the higher ranked Shakespeare festivals in America, as you might imagine. But Tom was just Tom. He was unique, man. People always ask me, how'd you know? And I said, all I can tell you about Tom, for a 21-year-old guy, he had such a fabulous sense of self. He knew who he was. He knew who he was as a performer. He understood that he was a gawky kid, you know, who had to play into that. And he just knew who he was. He was never having any trouble finding himself. So Tom became Kip.
Kip Wilson.
Kip
That was
Wilson.
my favorite show. I never missed it, Bosom Buddies.
Good show.
It was a great show, great writing, great acting. I watched it first
Wendy
time.
Jo, Sperber, Holland Taylor,
Holland Taylor, amazing. Just a
Holland is still working. Holland is now in this this miniseries, Hollywood. She's like the third lead. I mean, Holland, I don't know how she's got to be, you know, she's got to be the oldest actress in the world, but she can still bring it.
I just watched her, it was on Broadway HD, her performance of Anne. Her one-woman show. Oh my gosh.
I was there. I went to see her. That was a pretty, but you know, she's a force of nature. But at any rate,
so are you. You're a force of nature. But I want to settle this question with directing, stage, looking at the big picture. But you know, directing for, especially at the time when the years of Laverne and Shirley and all those, our biggest television screen was what, maybe 20 inches?
Yes, that's right. We weren't talking about huge size.
So you're directing for that person at home looking at this. It's got to change how you approach things. It's more technical, isn't it, in TV?
Well, at some point it gets very technical, but the act of simply staging and getting a run through of a little 22-minute play with seasoned professionals going after it because they're waiting. They don't want the producers looking at it saying, excuse me, you think you can do some better work? So they're going to go after these run throughs because their ego is into it. They want to get the run through out, get it done, deal with whatever notes they got, and move on. They're ready. They got to do another one the week after that. They just finished doing one. So this is not, this is no time to be overindulging the process. They just get out there, they do it, and basically then comes the technical part. The last 2 days, you have to understand the system of camera blocking and how one goes about camera blocking. But essentially, you begin to realize that you do not stage actors. You stage sets. You bring the actors to points in the set where you know you can shoot them. You don't send them off into corners of the set that are impossible to shoot unless you've got some death wish or something. But essentially, the couch is always in a shootable spot. The dining room table, shootable spot. Going over behind the kitchen to the sinks, shootable. You know, and basically, you then set up your ground plan so that wherever the actors wanted to go, you know you could shoot them. And then you would watch and see if they wandered about or if you thought they were wandering too much. But there's certain things. We all have systems. People go to the same chair in your own home. They sit in the same place on the sofa. The head of the table is always the person at the head of the table. It's not like tomorrow you'll be head of the table. We all have our places that we keep on repeating. And we live in a certain space and we have things we do. We always jump on the counter and sit, although somebody else might think that's really not the best thing in the world to be doing. But essentially, that's kind of what you did. You kind of did that and you let the actors take it.
And the technology has changed so much. I mean, from when you started really the golden age to just a few years ago. I mean, talk to us about that. What, you know, the learning curve.
Yeah, the technology has helped enormously the producers and the writers. The writers can tell more complex stories because the technology makes it easier to shoot. So they've got that opportunity. The producers, on the other hand, got the opportunity. When we went from film, which is 3 cameras, Jimmy Burrs came along with a 4th camera because the only way he could shoot Taxi was getting another camera there because the damn place there was so long. So then we had 4 cameras. Then all of a sudden, people start to go into tape. Why? Because tape, you could, it was cheap. It rolled forever. You don't have, with film, every 10 minutes, you were changing reels. It could be in the middle of a brilliant take and you're changing reels. So people started to go to tape. And in 4-camera tape, what happened was that they came up with a way so that you would have a screen, not unlike the one we're looking at right now, where you have every camera's feed on the screen, and then you'd have a cut down here of how you're cutting from this to this to this to this to this to this, what your pattern is. Now the problem is once the producers got wind of the fact that they can watch these 4 monitors and see what the cameras are shooting, then all of a sudden you start to get more input than you wanted as a director. Then all of a sudden you were getting things like, you think that camera can be shooting a cleanup, a single of that person? And I'll go, they did the last time around. Oh, I didn't see that. Can we do it again? got you really nutso. If they simply were asking for stuff that I'd already done simply because they couldn't view, but so they got better and better and better. But basically, it took power away from the directors, unless you're a power director.
How important is your relationship with your editors?
Well, the editors, not overly important. I mean, I always go in to talk to them in the hope that at least the first presentation will be presented what I'm looking for it to be presented. If I have anything, but you gotta remember, 95% of a situation comedy is by rote. It doesn't change much. They're all in the same house or the same workplace at the same spot. You know, the bosom buddies, they had their cubicles. Amy had hers from the other thing. There was an office. But once that's set, it's easy, you know, for them to go where they need to go. So I forgot even where I was going with this one.
Well, let me go somewhere else.
Okay.
So, you know, I've got your list of TV shows, and at least 3 Oscars fell out from people who you worked with in the start of their career to where they ended up.
Approved.
Well, I'm going to ask you about a couple people. Why don't you tell us what it was like? Mork and Mindy, what was it like working and directing Robin Williams? Especially back then in the 70s, he was the hottest stand-up.
Well, it was interesting enough because Robin wasn't the first actor cast as Mork.
Really?
He was not. They were in rehearsal with another actor. I believe it might have been John Biner, but I could be wrong about that. But
I know who John Biner was.
But nobody else would care. But at any rate, they didn't like what he was doing. Now, everybody in town knew about Robin Williams from his off-the-wall work in his improv group, but nobody would touch him with a 10-foot pole. They were scared of him because he just went off and all of a sudden was into improv land. So they were in trouble. So Gary Marshall decided, that's it. We're just going to make it work with Robin. And they brought Robin in to play Orc in that. He had 3 days to get it done. And by golly, that was Mork. And Mork at that point, when the first time I worked with him, I knew that if you would ask me, did I ever work with anybody who I knew would have to be a star, it would have to be Robin Williams because his outrageous talent was insane. And yes, there was a little bit of cocaine going on in that period of his life.
A little.
A little. I'm being nice. I'm trying to be nice. But he was really a gentleman. He always talked very gentlemanly to people. You know, my wife, who's a shrink, after meeting him enough times, knew that he was depressed. She already knew that he was a depressed soul, and his alter ego was this insanely wild, inventive comic, because he could go to a party and be off to the side, hiding himself, and all of a sudden the character kicks in and he's gone. But he was amazing to work with. I taught him only one thing, which he held on to, which saved him and me. I said, listen, at that time we were doing Mork and Mindy on film. And I said to him, listen, if you're doing something and you want to go off and have a good time, don't move your mark. Stay put, because if you move, there's no guarantee you will have any of that speech on camera. Because everything is choreographed. The cameras know that they're shooting this spot. They don't know that you're going to break all of a sudden. You have a little more flexibility in tape. But, and he learned to do that. So if he really went off and had a wonderful time with some kind of improvisation that held, and they decided to hold it on the show, he had a discipline now to go to. But he was something else, yeah.
Well, you know, especially like you said, your directors just get out of the way, let them do it. I mean, Robin Williams, I can't even imagine. Did you ever have to bring him down?
You didn't bring Robin Williams down. That was not how you approached working with Robin Williams. You'd see something that you think might be funny, and you throw it out as he's working, you know, zap it. And basically, but I was just packaging. I was just making sure that whatever he came up with made sense story-wise and was shootable.
How many episodes did you shoot of that show?
I don't remember, 3 or 4. Early on, the deal was Howard Stern was doing Mork and Mindy. I was doing Laverne and Shirley. We were flipping them, and finally, Howard and I got together and said, "Listen, no, this flipping is stupid." So I took Laverne and Shirley. He stayed with Mork and Mindy.
Laverne and Shirley, Penny Marshall. I mean, how great is that plot? And also, she's an amazing actor. She comes really ready to play, but she's also the sister of the producer. Tell us about that.
Well, she's the sister of Gary Marshall. And one of the other producers was Tony Marshall, who was her father. So basically, the biggest problem we were having was that it didn't happen when I was there. It was 2 years before I got there. Cindy and Penny were having a hard time with each other because Cindy felt like everything and every break and everything and every great joke and line was going to Penny because of her brother Gary. And we had to live with that kind of stuff. The biggest story I remember was there was some problem, and Penny and Cindy just wouldn't. Oh, I know what they were doing. They were doing. It was the middle of the Suzanne Summers battle for women's recognition. Why should they be getting half of what the men are making? That kind of stuff. And that's what was going on. Laverne and Shirley were making exactly 50% of Henry Winkler and Ron Howard, although they were number one, and Henry Winkler and Ron Howard were number two. So they were having some difficulty as they were trying to put that all together. So I remember that they didn't show up one morning, but we got the show run in the afternoon, so it was okay. And all of a sudden, the paychecks were to come in, and no paycheck for Penny. There's just no paycheck. How could there be no paycheck? So she storms into her father and says, Dad, how could there's no paycheck? He said, because I didn't like the way you behaved on the set. He just withheld her like it was an allowance. And she basically had to apologize for her behavior before he gave her a paycheck. But anyway,
well, you know, that was the time too in the 70s, and correct me if I'm wrong, but even some women couldn't get credit cards in their own name at the time.
Oh no, you couldn't get credit cards in your own name.
No.
You didn't think about it that much, but you damn well should have. I mean, I was kind of in on it as I realized that Suzanne was trying to, you know, manipulate the system to make more money because she was the key character. Suzanne, I think, was the character he had in Three's Company, the dumb blonde.
Gosh, TV in the 70s, my God. I mean, Friday nights, Saturday nights, it was just amazing. You know, you did talk about Tom Hanks, Peter Scolari. Could you give us just a little bit more about, give us a backstage story of Bosom Buddies? Anything that was...
Bosom Buddies? Well, the big story about Bosom Buddies was really the fact that Peter Scolari came in late, that we had some actor who'd been doing these beach blanket bingo movies or something, who was a little heartthrob. Nice kid, heartthrob. They thought that'd be great. They'll pair him up with Tom, and that'll be the Bosom Buddies. And like, came in, and literally 1 hour into the rehearsal, I called the producers and I said, "You guys have got to come down here and see what's going on." And basically, they saw and they said they realized we can't go forward with this guy. So they pulled the plug on this guy. I don't remember his name. It's probably a good thing. And essentially, I had just finished doing a show with Peter Scolari called Good Time Girls, or On the Waterfront, or something like that. I don't remember. It was a good cast. Annie Potts was in it, and all kinds of strong people. But anyway, so I'd just been doing that, and I thought to myself, I bet you Peter Scolari could be a good match for Tom Hanks. And basically, so we had a meeting with the ABC network at that particular point, came over, and they wanted to just pull the plug on the show and say, "Listen, that's it. We'll forget about it." And I said, "Can I get an idea in here? What if we use Peter Scolari?" And they went, "Well, I don't know." I said, "I'll tell you what. You let me bring Peter Scolari in tomorrow morning. I will put 3 scenes with Tom on its feet. You will come to a run through. Peter will be aware of the fact that he is not being paid, and it's no guarantee of anything. But if you like what you see, let us stay in production. If you don't like what you see, goodbye and call it a day." He liked it. We shot it, and those scenes never got changed a second. Those guys had hit it off that well.
And they had amazing chemistry. I mean, that was a great show.
No, that was a very, very good show, very good acting, and you know, it was that was a pleasant surprise, that whole show.
What the Jamie Foxx show? Tell us a little bit about working with Jamie Foxx. Yet another, eventually down the line, another Oscar winner. That's right.
That's right. You have Jamie Foxx. You all have another physical clown, Marlon Wayans. I had to deal with the Wayans.
Yes, you did.
But at any rate, it was not a good period of time. I mean, the industry, as we know, was being considerably white and maybe written by Jews and acted by goys. That was our gag in those days. You couldn't get the Jews acting, but you could get them right because we could write funny. But at any rate, we had, where was I going?
Well, you worked with the Wayans brothers and Jamie Foxx.
That's right. So Jamie Foxx. So basically during that period of time, because things were really wrong-minded, we had not yet opened up the possibility of too many women directors. We had not opened up the possibility of too many Black directors. None of those things were existing. There were a few scattered people who were starting to make names for themselves, but nothing compared to the 80 to 90% that was all white in terms of the directing group. Now, I got picked. when I think about it now, it makes me a little embarrassed, but the fact is that I helped a lot of these people. I got picked as the go-to Black director because I wasn't Black, but at least I grew up in a Sheepshead Bay section of Brooklyn where I understood street gang logic. And I'd actually met Blacks in my life where some other people hadn't done that. So they thought I'd be just the perfect person to do that. And they would always bring in assistants that I brought up that were African-American who now have really major careers going. So I did finally help out because if I didn't do those pilots, that would have been work that would have never happened for a lot of very, very talented people. But Jamie Foxx was very behaved. He was really very behaved. He had no, he wasn't around there to waste time. He was moving. He was moving, and he always seemed to know his words. He never brought a script in. He knew that he can get through it because if he understood what the scene was about, and he understood how they write the character, he figured, you know, I can get through most of it. And he did. And then we'd have to obviously get him tighter and tighter on script as we start to get closer to shooting. He would just play, have a good time.
It's such a talented, just so much talent. He's just amazing. And again, there's just so many people you've worked with. I want to just touch on, I'm going to open it up for questions with our people here, but My Big Fat Greek Wedding. I mean, what an amazing show. Now, correct me, because I believe I saw this back in the day, but it was a one-woman show that Nia Barlow's had. And then I believe Tom Hanks' wife, whose family is Greek, saw the show and approached her, and then that whole relationship started.
Pretty much that's exactly it. It's even better than that because Tom and Rita were in New York catching some Broadway shows. And Rita says to Tom, when we get back to LA, we're going to start going to the theater. Tom, of course, is not paying any attention to this yet because it's not real threat. Then all of a sudden she opens up the paper, and that's the only day that Nia Vardalos put an ad in that paper for her one-woman show, My Big Fat Greek Wedding. So Rita went. She thought, wow, my God, and brought Tom. Tom this time had to go. He didn't have any choice. And they really liked it, and they basically made a deal. They went backstage. They optioned it. You know, made all the deals they had to do with all other people, you know?
I mean, but that's, because I did see the show. It was amazing. And just a fan, you know, to hear her stories, it was like talking about my family. Grew up in an Italian-American family. And
Jewish. It's all the same.
Jewish or anybody, but it was just such a great breath of fresh air. First of all, seeing a woman doing a show was so beautiful, heartfelt, and you just felt great when you left. And then to see the success. That exploded. I mean, the one time she puts an ad in, she lands Tom Hanks and Rita Wilson.
You're not bad, not bad. But you know, there's things, timing critical, luck critical, talent really critical. Having the luck of being in the right place at the right time and not the talent to pull off what it is that they're somehow pushing you into. That's something you have to, you know, you have to continue to build. If you have a care for being in this industry, you've got to just keep on staying on top of craft. You know, and then you build credentials, and with credentials, people respect you and they listen to what you have to say.
Well, and for her too, wasn't this her first movie? I mean,
yes,
I know.
Was.
And she's playing against Lady Kazan, of all people. I mean.
And Andrea Martin, I brought in, because of Tom's ability to control them staying out of our way with casting, we were able to cast pretty much a group of people that everybody didn't recognize. I didn't want to stunt cast this movie. I was not interested in having, you know, somebody everybody knows playing these roles because I wanted them to somehow get caught up in these characters.
Well, you know, Andrea Martin, I'm a huge fan of, and of course, you know, she's so big in musical theater, and a lot of people are. Yes. What is it like to work with her? What's she like?
Andrea's funny. I mean, she's maybe the funniest lady I've ever worked with, for sure. And basically, she came to me first day of shooting. She came to me. She said, "You know, I'm a sketch actress, so if I'm getting too big, you got to let me know." So I said, "Let me tell you something. The reason you were cast for this character is because this character is the biggest character in the show. She thinks she's the prima donna of everything." And then she just ran with that. I mean, if you remember the scene where she was talking about the growth on her shoulder.
Yes.
And basically turns out to be her twin. So we're in the kitchen. Yeah. I blew that take 3 takes in a row. I just couldn't stop laughing. They finally had to remove me from the set so she could get the speech done. She just would wind up into it, and I'm all over, because she has this very pseudo seriousness when she attacks these things, and it just took me away.
Oh, she's a master comedian. I mean, a comedic actress. She can
Very
do it
much so.
all. Just amazing. Okay, let's open it up. Does anybody have a question for Mr. Joel Zwick? Raise your hand. Anybody? We're just running out of time. Okay, Wendy. Let me just unmute you. Go ahead.
Hi, I just wondered what your favorite 80s sitcom, if you had like a favorite 80s sitcom story from directing.
From directing, my favorite story, usually, the favorite stories, can this be R-rated?
Yes.
Of course. Oh, please.
It's
a prerequisite.
I'm all like speaking for
All right. Anyway, we're doing an episode of Full House.
I would say so. I mean, wow. Well, we asked for the story.
Yeah.
We asked for it. There you go. Full House. That Dave Coulier, comedian, Bob Saget, comedian, worked kind of blue. If you know him, to see him working with these kids, and then John Stamos, who was probably fresh off of his General Hospital.
No. He had a little one-season run with Jack Klugman in some kind of a comedy.
That's right. That's right. So can you give us a little nugget of Full House? I know that's a favorite of a lot of people here.
Full House. Well, first, once again, Bob Saget wasn't the original father.
Really?
We did that pilot with another actor who was quite good and basically sold the pilot. However, Jeff Franklin, who created Full House, he was very close friends with Bob Saget. And Saget was not available to do the pilot because he had a gig at that time doing jokes on the CBS morning show for 5 minutes or something. But anyway, he became available, so we asked the network, can we switch fathers? And we did. We brought which was good because Saget and Coulier were best friends. I think that Coulier was best man for Bob Saget's wedding, and John just kind of fit in with them and liked playing around. But it was pretty. We used to have a thing called the March of the Mothers, where Saget or Coulier, usually Saget, has opened up a blue mouth about something while all the girls were in earshot. Not just Mary-Kate and Ashley. We're talking about Stephanie. We're talking about Candace. They're all there. And all of a sudden, I'd see the three mothers locked, arm in arm, heading down towards Saget's dressing room to basically ream him out for not being able to control himself on set. But it was a family. Saget was a father. He had daughters that were the exact same ages as the three girls on the show. How bizarro is that?
Really bizarre.
Really bizarre. So basically, that's where he was with the girls at all times. Where Coulier and Stamos would be goofing around and carrying on. Saget was the father of the crowd, and he did what's a father. But it was interesting. There were a couple of wonderful things, like we're doing an episode, I think the girls are 4 or 5 at this point. I talk about the girls, I mean Mary-Kate and Ashley. And we're doing a scene in their kindergarten classroom. It's a scene where they're writing alphabet or something or other, and bing, bing, bing. I'm watching Ashley, I think it is writing her thing, right-handed. And the next scene we do, which we did, we flip to the other girl, so they're not doing back-to-back scenes. They get a chance to take a break. And the other girl is sitting there writing with her left hand. And I realized they're not twins. They are mirror image twins. One's a lefty, one's a righty. And so from that point on, Mary-Kate bit the bullet. And every time we needed her to write, she wrote, I think, with her right hand and got us through that particular problem. But we'd always be sure if there was writing to be done, we kept the righty in and kept continuity for that. But that was the moment of realization with, oh my heavens, that would have been a beauty if that got out that way.
Oh my gosh. Well, could you see on the horizon how big those two kids would get? I mean, they're millionaires.
They were the youngest self-made millionaires in the history of the United States. But the fact remains that their father, who was busy partnering with a business manager, was already manipulating and pushing these girls. They were getting no summer vacations. They were making their videos. They were doing everything. And basically they created this
empire.
We were not happy with that, by the way, on the set. We did not like the fact that they were tired. We didn't like the fact that we thought they were being worked too hard. We had some problems with that, but, you know, we had no control.
Yeah, yeah. Well, real quick, I'm just going to scan the room to see if anybody, we've gone over our time. Oh, Gretchen has a question. Gretchen?
Hey.
Hello.
I have a question. Well, actually, the Mary Kate and Ashley, I have two questions now. Is there an answer that they're not going to make a Fuller House appearance, right? You haven't heard anything.
They will never make a full, it's now been over. They finished shooting it. They're not making an appearance, no.
Okay, cool. And then, but my first question initially was, you worked on Family Matters, and I was just so curious how it was working with Jaleel White. Is that how you say his name?
Jaleel White.
Yeah, because growing up, I loved that show, watched it every day after school, and knowing that there was a spin later in the series that he then changed to being the suave, cool guy, I was just so enamored with his physical comedy and then able to be so suave. Like, how was it working with him?
And then what about when he played his Myrtle?
Yeah,
Myrtle.
right. Right, yeah.
Part of that was the fact that Jaleel started to pressure the writers. After being so successful, when he got to a certain age, he said, Jesus, how long do you think I can wear my pants up to my neck in a silly voice? Can you give me something else to act, something to challenge me? Because I think we can talk about after the fourth of him leaving the show unless they start to step up. And the first thing they talked about was the Myrtle Urkel character. And then they brought in Stefan, the good-looking, suave, alter ego, so that Jaleel would have different characters to play and not get himself nutso. It was essentially it. But he was a very hard, disciplined kid. He found that show. He didn't show up till about the 8th episode. And up till then, it was a very lovely family. And then when Urkel shows up, hello, it's all over. Yeah.
That's my favorite. Oh.
He's a nice guy, truly nice guy, has a lovely daughter. You'll be happy to know he's a mensch.
Cool. Oh, thank you so much.
Good to know. Well, you know, and you mentioned Perfect Strangers. You know, Bronson Pin's show, he was featured as Gomez Addams in our production of The Addams Family. Just what year was that? Gretchen, do you remember what year that was?
2015.
Okay. Yeah. So 5 years ago.
Yeah,
so that's what he's really known for.
Bronson is a man of multi-talents. He really is. I think that he was too talented and caused distress because of his inventiveness. And that's why, but he did have the run after he finished, we did Perfect Strangers. He got Mego, which was a 2-season hit where he played essentially the Mork character, but this time it was Mego from his planet instead of Mork from Mork. But essentially he did that, and after that, I had him in another show, which was called My First Husband, I think, where he played with Courtney Cox. And then after that, he spent 2 years as a character on Step by Step.
That's right.
And so he had a run there. They were using him because he was one funny dude. He could do characters. He did accents. He was very strong in that area.
Joel Zwick, how wonderful of you to take time out of your schedule to share these stories with us. You're such a doll, and on behalf of a grateful nation, thank you for all of the great TV. You said over 500 episodes of
No, finished at 650. Finished at 650 when I got the second term around. So I did 650
episodes of television, from everything from way back, Laverne and Shirley, Bosom Buddies, all the way to Casey Undercover, Fuller House, and beyond. And you know, we could talk to you for hours on this, but we're so grateful that you shared these stories with us today at 3D+U. And everybody, I just want to, let's give him a big round of applause here. Yay! This is the Zoom.
Yes, this is the Zoom applause.
Applause.
The visual.
Yes, the visual. We're so grateful. And again, this is 3D+U. We're doing free seminars